Hello, this is Janet Michael. In addition to hosting The Valley Today each weekday at noon on the River 95.3, I also produce podcasts, and I'm excited to introduce you to a new podcast series in partnership with Lord Fairfax Community College. Having provided higher education and career training for the past half-century, LFCC is tightly interwoven into the fabric of the Northern Shenandoah Valley and Piedmont regions. Join me every week for conversations with current and former students to hear their funny and inspiring stories as we learn about their journey to higher education, the role that LFCC has played, where they are now, and where they plan to go. We'll also talk to current and former professors about their experiences and best memories of LFCC over the past 50 years. Get every single episode as they're released on our website at theriver953.com under the podcast tab, or you can subscribe for free in Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, on Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for LFCC Stories. Hello and welcome to The Valley Today. I am your host, Janet Michael. Happy Wednesday as you are listening to the show today. It is The Valley Business Today, and it's an extra. March just will not let us go. It is an extra Wednesday in the month. That means we are talking with Patrick Barker. He is the Executive Director at the Frederick County EDA. And Patrick, we've got a fun conversation in store today because you made the mistake of emailing me a Jeopardy quiz that I have gone through every single question and answer, and am fascinated with some of this stuff. So we're going to do like a question and answer kind of format show today.
Let's do it.
So you put this together for the Top of Virginia Regional Chamber's Community Leadership Program. I always like to mention that because, I was the first graduate of that program. I'm not going to say what year, but I was the very first graduate in the first graduating class. So it's a great idea.
I went through it myself in 1999. So when I first came to the area, and it was one of those, when I was sitting in after I did it, planning committees and such, and you were trying to find, different ways to deliver the same information to the class because they get talked to a lot. So it's like, well, let's do something, kind of off the wall. Let's just do like a quiz session to see how much people really know about the community that they live and work in. And the first year it was a smashing success. And, we just kind of built on it from there, adapting the questions based on current events, or, trying to think of what are some good cocktail questions that'll come up at your New Year's Eve party. I mean, usually we're right before the holiday break, and when we deliver the quiz, and it's fun, it's insightful. People generally always learn something that they didn't know about the area, and I think that's a pretty important aspect. So to be engaged, and there's some cool facts that we throw out there, and some ones that maybe scratch your head that kind of go against what your perception is, and that's part of what the quiz is trying to do.
And I think that was the biggest thing for me as I was going through looking at these questions and answers. There are some things in here that I thought I knew that I was wrong about. So it was kind of like, oh, I've lived here my whole life and I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating community that we live in. There's so many drivers, so many yings and yangs, and we're blessed to live in a place that we are, that economically has been fairly well insulated from the ups and downs, and for the most part a very vibrant and diversifying economy. And I think it's important that when the students go through the program and such, that they understand that they try not to take for granted that what we have. And we're Frederick County, Winchester's not perfect. We've got aspects that we have to work on and such, which the quiz highlights. But there's a lot of things to be really, really proud about. And as we tell the students, we're obviously, the EDA is out there cheerleading our community and trying to let people know how great a place it is to live, work, and play. But we're only a small voice, and so when they're out there, it's important, that they do as much positivity boasting about the community as they can, because that word of mouth is a key thing that keeps people to stay and encourage people to come.
So let's start with an easy question. I'll throw you a softball question because I know you know all the answers to this. You put the quiz together, so you know all the answers. What is the approximate population of Winchester, Frederick County?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a question that gets torn about a lot because people think Winchester and they forget about Frederick County, or they think Frederick County and forget about Winchester. So, really, it's a pretty big community when you add them both together based on the Weldon Cooper Center's, most latest estimates. We're probably close to 120,000, which is a pretty big number. I mean, the city itself's in and around 25 to 30,000, but the county makes the bulk of that. And you compare that to the other jurisdictions that abut us, around the, Warren County and Shenandoah County, and collectively together, both of them don't equal what Winchester and Frederick County's population base is. So there's a lot of reasons why a lot of the, I guess what people generally conceive of as growth from a business standpoint in the retails flock to Frederick County, because that's where the population bases are. That's what has become kind of the, the commerce centerpiece for people coming to shop, live, and work. So, it's been a really impressive, run for that standpoint. So it's a big number to pull from. And, we obviously know that, for a lot of other operations, they look beyond those political boundaries. So it's a big number.
And we've had a decent percentage of growth over, say, the last 10 years, 20 years. We've had a decent percentage of people moving into our area as well.
Yeah, we have a lot of, just natural increase, which is from birth and stuff like that. And then obviously people moving into the area, so if you go back to, 2010, which puts it about a decade or so, you're seeing an average increase for our area over those 10 years, about 12%, which puts it near the top of all the metropolitan statistical areas in the state of Virginia. Again, which is great, because that creates a lot of labor force for employers to pull from. The converse start is that obviously sometimes creates a lot of school children, which we have to find money to pay for. So there's kind of a yin and a yang in there.
Well, and I noticed on the chart that was as part of the answer, we are second only to Northern Virginia, which is kind of cool, I guess, in some respects.
It depends on what side of the equation you end up on, growth, whether or not you think that's a positive or a negative. But, I'm always one of those glass half full, kind of people. So we really have to take a look at, and find what are the benefits of that, and understanding that there's going to be some, pushes that go against that, but we just have to work with inside our community to make sure that we're doing things that go in concert with what the growth demands are.
Well, it was interesting. One of the questions was people from this county moved to Winchester, Frederick County at the second largest rate. That was something that kind of surprised me. What county is that?
That actually, if you look at the numbers and what they're talking about there, they're using migration patterns, which the U.S. Census does kind of on an estimate basis. But, that surprise is coming from Fairfax. I think a lot of people ultimately would maybe think it's, some other county in Northern Virginia and or someplace else. But when you look at where people are coming from, Loudoun obviously is the biggest leader in that. They're probably, the last numbers were close to 2,500 people, but Fairfax not too close behind. And some of that is, looking at commuting and where the people are coming from. They're driving out that far, then they come out here. And then also people that are just trying to escape that, that Northern Virginia lifestyle, looking to stretch their dollar a little bit more. Or a lot of them, I've found there's some good, decent jobs out here, or a spouse is gonna get a job in Winchester and commute, where the other spouse will commute to the west. So, we have a lot of positives. That part of what we're trying to do, obviously, is anyone who is commuting out to work on trying to create those jobs, attract those jobs, and make them aware of the jobs that are available locally for them to, kind of first kind of understand their cost of commuting, so that when they go to look for a local job, they have kind of a baseline understanding that what they make in Fairfax is not going to be the same of what they make here, just to give them some kind of expectations, as well as for the employers. So when they're trying to work with someone, if you're paying 40% of what a Fairfax job is, probably a good chance you're going to have some conversation with that person that, they're going to be seeking a little bit higher pay, just based on what they're making now, even with, you taking out the gas costs and such. But, so again, Loudoun and Fairfax are our two biggest ones. And then we get a lot of people from Warren and Shenandoah County as well. So
I hear a lot from people at the Chamber of Commerce back in the day, from the EDA in Front Royal and Warren County, about Warren County in particular being a bedroom community, that so much of their population lives on the mountain and they commute into the city every day or several times a week. Is Winchester, Frederick County considered a bedroom community?
no, not yet. And I say yet because obviously things can change, over time. And we've seen that that changed or that. And when people say a bedroom community, just for the listeners know, that's generally defined when you have 50% of your working population that is commuting outside the area for work. Right now, again, if you look at the numbers, which they made this a little bit easier 10, 20 years ago when part of your census form you filled out, you checked on where you work, but they took that question out several years ago. So it makes it a little more difficult to see. But right now, we are sitting in Frederick County, Winchester, about 63, 64%, which is about 35% of the people who are working age live and work in our community. Then obviously, we have a sizable amount of people that come in from outside the market. The bulk of that you would anticipate is coming from West Virginia, the Hampshire counties, the Berkeley counties, the Hardy counties. Then we have a lot that come into the community from outside in our neighboring jurisdictions like Warren and Warren and Shenandoah. But on the converse side, we have about close to 40% of people that are leaving for work, and for economic developers, we see that as a workforce that's leaving. That we want to make sure that we try to maintain and attract that. So part of our job really is digging into understanding who is that that out community population. And it's about 10,000 or so that are going to Northern Virginia. Then about the same number is going to go someplace, other than where we are or adjacent locality. But, part of the EDA's effort is really trying to peel back and who is that labor force, and then what can we do to educate our employers on who's leaving. So when they start, looking at expansions or breaking off new divisions, that they have an idea of a workforce that's already here, but driving someplace else. And when we've, done studies that kind of, peel back that commuting population, it's amazing. It's all across the board. It's everyone from, you would expect, people working in .coms and, the big office towers, to teachers, to medical professionals, fire, even a lot of retail. When we've done surveys in the past, kind of the most surprising and probably disturbing number was that I believe the number was like 60% of people that drove to Northern Virginia were making less than $40,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah, which for us, we're like, it doesn't make any sense. And that was a survey, so you can argue that some of the higher paid salaries weren't represented, but nevertheless, I mean, there's clearly a large number of people that are driving for jobs that arguably you could find locally, at a comparable salary, particularly once you net out, the gasoline costs, and we're not even getting into the time. But on the other side, there's some that are working, shift hours, so they're on, they're like, if you're a firefighter or a health professional and you're working 12 hours, 24-hour shifts, those are going to be difficult to convince someone to want to reverse. But for folks that are working, in construction or education or some other office or manufacturing jobs, we have those. I think, and the big disconnect, the one thing we've really tried to do is make people aware of those, because, the general human belief, is that the grass is always green on the other side, or higher salaries are always there, or I can't make the same money locally, because people just, we know, didn't stop to think of how much gas they put in their car and what that cost is every year. So, we've taken advantage of cost of commuting calculators, that are out there to try to educate people on what it is. And, the sweet spot really is, people going Leesburg East. Those are the audience that typically have the most potential you can make at least a financial argument as to why they should want to work locally. And we're going to do more of that in the future. I mean, part of the talent strategies that we're working on at the EDA with our partners in the surrounding counties is getting after that. It's trying to be a big, much more educational factors about the jobs that are here and the cost of commute. Particularly with our Navy Federal location and all the folks they'll have, and they're using it already. I mean, when they made when they were going through their process to locate, one of the big pushes they had was targeting the people that are commuting to the east. They have a lot of those jobs that are comparable to what people are driving for, comparable salary ranges and such. So there's that, for sure. But a lot of it, like most anything, it's just making people aware of what the opportunities are.
Do you think that with the pandemic and so many people who have transitioned to working remotely, is that going to be a benefit? Is that going to help? Is that going to hurt, do you think, from a workforce perspective? Because at least now, if they're working remotely, they're still here. If they're living here to shop and to spend their money during the day instead of leaving, do you think that's going to have any kind of impact on economic development?
I think, yeah, I think the question is it could be. I think there's a lot of you hear a lot of conversations on round tables and such about the remote workers. Are they here to stay? Are they here to go? And you kind of get a mixed bag when you talk to some employers, and site consultants. They'll tell you, that some part of it's going to stay. People will say, no, for a culture standpoint and such, we'll probably allow like some of it, but it's not going to be to the extent. Whereas other ones will just go full remote. So I think it's going to come down to the operation which the company is doing, the culture which the company has within it, and then just the company's ability. But there are clearly some advantages from that, that you can now potentially need less office space if you're not, doing that, or if you're hot seating, which is one person sharing the same office with someone else on different shifts. So it's a lot of, for that. I think that the challenge for Virginia, at least, and not for the state, but for the localities, is that the localities make money off of the real estate, the personal property, that companies invest, not on what someone makes from an income standpoint. Now, there is some residual, which you mentioned about sales, retail sales and such, but generally speaking, it pales into comparison to what, brick and mortar or equipment and such costs. Whereas Virginia, they make everything off the person's salary, their income tax. So Virginia sees a lot of advantages for remote working, and such. But I think localities are still trying to figure out, how's that fit with inside our need for revenue, and the growth. So if you're going to encourage remote workers and they've got kids that are coming, you've got a lot of, expenditures required, for the household, but then not a lot of income coming from it. So, I mean, I'm sure there'll be some kind of middle ground that the localities try to broker, but I think that's the kind of what if, is that we're all still trying to wait and see how companies are going to react to it. And then, localities will probably do something that's going to be a comparable reaction.
Do you think we're still probably another year out from being able to figure out where that's going to land, another year to 2 years on the other side of this? Because I would guess once we get to the end, if there ever is an end to this pandemic, there's still going to be another transition period from some of these companies now trying to figure out, what does our new normal look like? Is it everybody coming back? Is it some of you coming back? Is it coming back sometimes or not? Are we downsizing? Are we upsizing? It's not just going to suddenly be like it was before.
No, I don't. I know it won't be an immediate, turn switch and go on. But I mean, you've already started to hear some company make decisions on pulling people back in, how they're going to pull them back in, and site consultants are saying the same thing. They don't expect the remote workers, at least site consultants, most of them don't expect the remote workers status to continue as it is. And you've heard that from some employers. It's again, it's a mixed bag. It depends on the size of your corporation, the operation that you're doing, whether or not how does that lend to remote capacity, and how's the culture, because culture is so big for a lot of companies, how they're able to maintain that in a remote environment. So, I think you'll probably see for some, we'll probably go back to full as things were. When that happens, who knows? I mean, I've given up trying to look at crystal balls and figuring things out here. I just kind of, take it day by day, but you just kind of maybe look at it month by month instead of like 12 months and beyond. But and you've got some companies, that are probably going to approach a hybrid model, that's worked for them, and they'll do that, and I'm sure they may even look at the kind of the specific act work that a worker does, and maybe that stays remote where other ones come back in. I mean, I have no doubt the employers will do the right thing for each of their companies and each of their employees. That's what makes one of Virginia's assets so wonderful, is that they really do listen to the employees. That's one reason why we don't have that right. We're a right to work place. We don't have a lot of unions. That employers are pretty awesome about listening, to their employees and trying to find something that works for both. I mean, they obviously have a business they have to run and metrics they have to hit. And then at the same point, they want to make sure they have employees that are happy and productive.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about manufacturing because that's something you can't do from home. I mean, you can't really be doing a lot of the manufacturing jobs from your house, your garage, or your kitchen. Can we talk a little bit about how many manufacturing companies we have here? And I know that in the quiz, I was wrong when I picked my guess about the one that's been here the longest. So we'll
Sure.
come back with that question after this break. Will that work for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation on the Zoom screen today with Patrick Barker. He is the executive director at Frederick County's Economic Development Authority. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Got a financial decision to make or a goal to reach, but you don't know where to start? You've come to the right place. Introducing Quick Money Chats with the Northern Shenandoah Valley Financial Education Program. Visit tinyurl.com/Quick Money Chat to schedule a virtual chat with a staff member or trained volunteer. We won't tell you what to do, but we will give you the tools you need to choose wisely. And because Virginia Cooperative Extension is part of Virginia Tech and Virginia State, your land-grant universities, you can be sure that our information is credible and trustworthy. And you'll know that we aren't trying to sell you something. Maybe you want to improve your credit score, or reduce your banking overdraft fees, or even figure out if you can afford to buy that car. Sorting through tons of information on the internet can be overwhelming, and sometimes it can be hard to know who to trust. Schedule a Quick Money Chat and get the information you need to take action. Go to tinyurl.com/Quick Money Chat and get financial education personalized for you.
Welcome back to the Valley today. I am your host, Janet Michael. Happy Wednesday. As you are listening to the show today, that means it is the Valley Business Today. And because there is an extra Wednesday in the month, we are having a conversation with Frederick County's EDA's Executive Director, Patrick Barker. And we've been playing a sort of Jeopardy game, which is really kind of cool. Patrick, I mentioned this at the top of the show. I love information. I love trivia and knowledge and knowing things. And when I first looked at this, I thought, I've lived here my whole life, born and raised here. There isn't anything in these questions that I'm not going to have the answer to or that's going to surprise me. And I have been surprised by quite a few things. I think this was a genius idea. I think you should take this whole show on the road and do Jeopardy across the county.
I'm not sure how well it would go that way, but I am appreciative that you learned something. That's what when I do the program, that's what my whole goal is that, I want them to learn a couple of things they didn't know before, and be proud of the community that they live in. There's a lot of great things about Frederick County and Winchester that get overlooked a lot. And I think by knowing where you're coming from gives you a better idea where you're trying to go.
When we went to break, we were talking a little bit about remote workers and people leaving the area to go work somewhere else. We have a huge manufacturing base in our community. So obviously that eliminated a lot of remote work. I mean, I'm pretty sure that people at Valley Protein and Thermo Fisher, that they're not working from home necessarily. Who do we have? I mean, we've had a lot of manufacturers in our area for a really, really long time.
Right. In one of the questions we always throw out to people, we kind of give them a list of, 5 or so companies that most people have heard about. I know Winchester Metals, Valley Proteins, Thermo Fisher, they were Bayer before, and then Continental, which seems like has a name every day, O'Sullivan and Hornshoe, then obviously the Shockey companies. And we asked them which of that list is the longest that has been inside our market. And a lot of people, kind of jumped to either Valley Proteins or Continental, or Shockies, and for a lot of them, they're surprised to see that is Continental, that has been here for as long as they have. And since 1896 is the origins that they go back to as far as in our community. So it's pretty phenomenal that we've been able to boast that. And we have a long list of manufacturing operations that have been here for 25, 50 year plus, which is a beautiful stamp of approval for our community, and being able to kind of nurture those companies once they came here through all the corporational changes and restructures and such they had to have that many that have been here for that long is a real testament to the community, and the ability to provide the necessary infrastructure that they need, to do their job, whether it be electric or roads, but obviously for workers too, because that's obviously the key is, one of the most integral components of all employers, particularly that of manufacturing, is having a good quality, stable flow of workforce.
Well, and you see that a lot on a national level where companies get bought out and then suddenly you see plants closing and you see them moving everything to a different location where they're combining workforces. The fact that a company like O'Sullivan has been here this long and has gone through several different name changes, some different ownerships, and they've stayed. Do you use that in your pitch of sorts when you're talking to other companies about how you've been able to work and keep companies here that long?
Yeah, particularly, absolutely. Obviously depends on the sector of the company, but obviously, yeah, letting them know that they want to see that you've had tenure inside of Pacific, overall, but in their Pacific segment, because that's again, kind of a third party approval. If you've had companies that have just come and only been here for 5 or so years, that may show you have something, but these companies are making investments not to be here for 5 years, to be here for 10, 20 years. I mean, they're putting down significant funds. So they want to know that your community has what it takes for an employer to be successful, both the short term and the long term. And I think that's a part where Frederick County, we have a really great story that we can tell by different kinds of companies, manufacturing wise, and different kind of sectors, and how they've been able to evolve. Whether it be new manufacturing processes or just changes in the economy and how their employment base and the communities have adapted and evolved to that. Because the product they're making now, will obviously change over time. So it's been a great asset for us that that when they introduce a new technology, the employment base, does a great job in relearning that, retooling themselves. And that's how manufacturing has proceeded. I mean, when 20 years ago you needed 50 people on one line, now you may only need 5, but those 5 people are doing vastly different skill sets than the folks did 20 years ago. So it's a great testament to us. So you're so a long way around to your question is yes. So.
Well, and in the 90s, I mean, manufacturing was that's where you worked. That was where the jobs were. That was where the employment numbers were. In early 2020, there was a bit of a shift, though, to healthcare. Is that because of Valley Health? Is that because of the pandemic? Is it a perfect storm of a lot of different things?
No, I mean, I think it's kind of the perfect storm, or just I guess the evolution of economies. I mean, a lot of people saw their manufacturing operations, over the period of time that we're talking about, change drastically over the years. Some of them have nil to none left. I mean, we obviously, and some of that's just the evolution of manufacturing, that they needed less people. So some of it wasn't necessarily closing; it was just attrition, or they are bringing in more equipment that was more productive, had more productivity levels. So they didn't need as many people, but they needed a higher skilled, higher wage individual working that. So some of that, the numbers when you look at manufacturing now versus in the early 90s, that's a lot of that. And obviously the downturns, the Great Recessions and stuff like that have had their impact on that. And some of them just stayed where they are or evolved. But obviously, our areas, we talked about the 12% population base increase. So a lot of the job sectors that have grown over the years are a direct result of that. They're serving that population. Healthcare is a similar side. Retail is the same way. We went from 1990 around 5,000 people working retail to nearly 7,500 in 2000. And again, a lot of that is due to that 12% pop increase. Healthcare, I mean, clearly Valley Health is the centerpiece of that whole process. Than everything else that the doctor's offices and assisted livings and such like that that have come in as a result of that are all part of that. So I mean, it's kind of been a combination of factors that have evolved that. And the way we look at it, it's diversification of our economy. which to me, one of our hallmarks, that we have about 4 or 5 sectors that make up over half of our economy. So it allows us to kind of bob and weave during the downtimes and uptimes in economies. And more so, it gives people a lot of opportunities, various kind of opportunities to work within. So you're not stuck with just picking between, one employer or two different segments. Here you kind of have a cornucopia of options, which is, for us is great.
Now, do you guys have like a list of here are the ideal companies that we would love to have locate to this area? Is that list based on skilled workforce? Is it based on land mass for them to build something or existing buildings? I mean, how does that work when you're figuring out what's coming and where are we going to put them?
All the above. I think we can have a wish list, for sure. But I think it's one of the, in my opinion, one of the questions we as economic developers get asked almost every time, whether it be from the state project managers, site consultants, or companies, is who are you trying to recruit? Who are you trying to see grow and expand? Because that shows a little bit about the, I guess, the strategic direction of the community, versus just wheel of fortune, spin a wheel and take whatever comes. So for us, since I've been involved with the EDA for 20 some odd years, we've operated off of a targeted business study, which is it's looking at our community from a way a company views us, and whether it be workforce, whether it be land, utilities, and trying to understand what's the best fit for us. Because there's some sectors that we may be a fit for, but maybe from an environmental standpoint or a wage standpoint, they're no longer, it's not what we're seeking per se. Now, if zoning allows for it and all that, by all means, that's what the process goes for. But we, have been very proactive in trying to express who we need as a community to move ourselves forward. And as I tell the CLP class, and I tell community leaders, part of my job is to kind of like you do with your retirement funds. You want to diversify them and put them in the areas that are going to grow. And that's a lot when we look at what new companies are. We want to get new companies that are going to grow, where they're allow our community to get to that next level. And that next level generally means kind of higher, above average wage jobs. So right now our targets are kind of in 4 different pots. One's advanced manufacturing. You're going to find your folks like Trex, Fabritech, from Winchester Metals, Thermo Fisher are all going to be in those kind of groups. Business support operations. So your Trex, your Woodmarks, your Navy Federal Credit Unions, your FBIs, your FEMAs. Then your food processing and agribusiness operations. So again, your crafts, your hoods, and such. And then you've got the kind of catch-all professional creative services. So that's when you put in the cyber, fill in the blank, information jobs and such. And then the all-inclusive data centers, which has been a big target for us. And what we at the EDA are going through right now, an update to that. So it's been about 10 years since we had that done from a consultant viewpoint. So we hope to have that process done sometime this summer. It's going to be curious to see how the targets and if the targets change. Because obviously, we update it, fairly regularly. But having a site consultant's viewpoint on it is something we haven't had it done in a while. But it's important that we do that, because I think the community leaders and the EDA need to know, who we are fit for right now, and maybe who could we be a fit for, that matches all of the criteria that we're looking for. High, growth companies that have a kind of a long-term future, sectors, and ones that are paying above average wages and are environmentally friendly and that meet the kind of corporate structure and culture that we as a community have. So all those aspects go into it to make sure that when we're trying to evolve our community to that next level, that there's some logic to it, and that it flows with inside the community.
I'm going to quit giving people grief. Doug Stanley, who, when he was Warren County Administrator, I used to give him grief all the time and ask him why couldn't he get me a Panera? And he would try to explain to me what you just explained, which is it's not as simple as you want one, Janet. There are all of these other factors that have to go into how this works. And it's the same thing on a much larger scale than me wanting a Panera.
I say it's all the time, at least from a non-retail standpoint, is that, a lot of it is the site selection process should be, the initial part of it should be named the site elimination process, because that's how it starts. I mean, there's so much in the recruitment side that happens before we even touch anyone. I mean, they're working off their own data sets, and you're a number on a spreadsheet, and you don't really have an opportunity to kind of expand on why something may not be as rosy as they want to see. It's such a data-driven element these days, and part of what this, our next level of our targeted study is going to hopefully do, what we'll do is give us some really tangent storytelling points, because that's what a lot of companies want to hear. They don't just want to say, I got property, come visit, or I got workforce, come visit. They really want you to articulate, why is Frederick County different? What makes you so unique that we should want to take a look? Because, Frederick County is just one of over, 100 plus localities just in the state of Virginia. And that doesn't mean we're competing with all those, but it's just to share the point that companies have a choice. And so you really have now, at least the way our profession has evolved, you really have to articulate to a really specific level on how are you so different. And that's one of the things we're really excited for this next effort, is to give us that. And some of it we'll know. I mean, it'll come back and say you need workforce. Okay, that's kind of, but there's other aspects of it that will be different, and that we can use for us. And again, I think a lot of what I'm hopeful is, it's going to be great to hear the parts that we're really solid on, but it's going to be more, I think, helpful to kind of know where are some aspects that maybe we haven't focused on as much in trying to attract that next level kind of company that we could start, plowing the seeds for now, so that we can be more competitive down the road.
Yeah, that objective opinion is going to be so much more valuable when it comes from somebody who hasn't been living inside our box all these years.
Right. I mean, a data center is just the greatest element. I mean, that's one of the, data centers right now are like the .coms of 10 years ago. Every locality wants them. I mean, they're high wage jobs, low number jobs, big investment. I mean, they're, so it's, all right, what's our niche? What's our pitch to that? What's going to make someone want to, come here versus someplace else? And knowing that there's some problem parts of it that we're going to have to work on, that we're not ready for it maybe in totality yet, but, by doing A and B, maybe you got a more compelling story. So I think, we're just trying to put ourselves in the best position that we can, so our community is successful, so our citizens are successful, so our community can be someplace that people want to live, work, and play, and want to, be a magnet for other people to want to come to.
Well, I still want a Panera in Frederick County and Middletown near Lord Fairfax Community College. I think it makes a great idea. I expect you to make that work.
I'll put that right next to my Wegmans conversation. So.
Oh, yes, man. I knew I should have pitched for Wegmans first. Thank you so much for meeting up with me on the Zoom screen today to have this conversation. This has been fun. I have learned a lot.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
I will be back tomorrow. We are having a conversation tomorrow with Larry Weiss from the Community Foundation of Northern Shenandoah Valley. They have a grant process that is about to open, so he's going to give us all of the details for that tomorrow. So meet me back here just a few minutes after noon.